the idea of intention for all of us, and I want to look at a range of applications of intention across my work. If I speak too quickly or I'm mumbling, please let me know, okay? And I'll do my best to slow down and be clear. In philosophy and in psychological research, there is the definition that no two people can ever truly know what the other is thinking. We think we understand, but we will never, ever, ever actually know another person's experience. We are all uniquely alone in that. What we have developed is a fantastic ability to interpret what the other person means by what they say and what they do. We interpret their intention. And so for all of us here as creative people, because the premise of my work is that everyone is creative, and I know that you may be specifically creative, all of us, this is the fantastic opportunity, because that gap is the space for creation. It's that fundamental moment of taking whatever inspiration you get from somebody else or your own view of life, and you make a moment from it. You go forward. It's the fundamental place where our creativity springs from, I believe. We are interpreting the world constantly. And as creatives, whenever you make a mark in whatever form you do, whether that's a movement or a graphic or a word or a sound, whatever form you are, as soon as you make that mark, you have started this process of everybody else attempting to interpret what you've said. It's the wellspring of creativity. That moment where you act in some way and everybody else has to try and interpret it. And of course, we're very sophisticated now because, everybody reads, everybody understands visual language, everybody understands sound and music. So most people never engage with this moment because, of course I understand what you do. Of course I do. I know exactly what you're saying to me. I know what that means. But anyone who has had difficult moments in their lives in relationships knows that even the people you most profoundly love and you think you know the best, there's always a moment where you're going, no, you're not understanding me. No, there is always a gap. There is always a moment where we go, oh, you blockhead. Where you just have to have that breakthrough with them. So this is the fantastic place to start, so that we are constantly being creative in everything we do. And the intention is that forward moment to make a mark, to think forward, okay? Wait, what are you going to do? What are you going to communicate? And how does that ripple through the work and the process that you do? So when I'm working, I'm doing something from making my own work, where I have the privilege to say what I want to an audience as an artist. I then have projects where I'm working with a larger group of people and I'm interpreting a message to say to a different group of people through people that I maybe have not met before. And that keeps going on a vast scale. So I'm very lucky in my work in that I can work with a single dancer, or I can work with thousands of people on a global scale. And how does this influence what I do? How does this change? Does it change my intention? Does it change my work? What is my process when I go through those things? These are questions that, in order to come and talk to you today, I sort of had to process for myself and say, well, in the basis of communicating, what is it I have to say about intention in my work? So that's a little starter for us. That's where I'm beginning. So what I'd like to do is for those of you who don't know, I'm going to show you a little bit of my work, and then I'm going to break it down into 3 sections. The intention of the basic mark making that I do, the intention of working with people, and the intention of what I'm trying to communicate. Okay? Into 3 parts. Everybody with me so far? Okay. It's always tenuous, and as my basic premise was we never understand each other, I have to need to keep checking now. So. Okay, so I'm going to show you a little bit of the work. So, yeah, and this is just a general little bit of film I have to show people about the sort of thing we do. I apologise for its tone, but you'll get a sense of it, and then I can talk more. Okay? It's not too long. So that gives you a brief picture of the range of the work. And what I find interesting about it is the sense that there was the big discussion about when we work with different communities, do we have to do things differently? But we decided, coming back to this moment of intention, that what we wanted to do, whether we were working with little kids, old kids, whether we were working with a team of artists, or whether we were working with a community, is that we fundamentally always wanted to make the best art that we could. And so we decided that we would employ exactly the same process. It's mediated in terms of the speed at which we go and what we expect and what we ask of the people that we work with. But the intention of the work is always to be as potent. So we try and do with the city's community a whole work that has the same value to us as something that we've spent months in the studio, months and months, and developed over years. It's the same thing for us. We approach it in that way. So I'm going to break it down now so we can talk about some simple moments. I'm here at the moment to make a show. So obviously my personal intention is I like making artwork, it's great, and then I convince people that I'm the person for the job and I get a commission. Fantastic, yay! And so on one level, I get to travel off and work on a project, and I get my budget and my toys, and it's a great opportunity for me to explore my personal creativity, to say what I want to say and do what I need to do. So I can satisfy myself in that way. But the point of the work is to make a moment which is an attempt at a communication. And so the very first thing that I need to do in all of my processes, the first mark that I always make is I have to form a relationship with the people I work with. Because as an artist, my basic material as a choreographer and a director are people. So the first thing is this relationship with the people I work with. How do I fashion a creative environment for people to work in? So with my company, I have to start a personal relationship with the people I work with, and I have to start a creative relationship. And the steps that I take to doing this are to fundamentally try and communicate the sense that I have a demand from the people I work with, things that I need them to produce for me. In all the economic strictures that we all work in, you have a time and a deadline, and it has to be ready. But within that, the people that I work with are not a reductive version of me in terms of, it's not that I am the great mind, the team leader, it's I am the captain of the ship. It is simply that everybody on the ship has to sail it. And I all my job is to point, we're going that way. And then everybody else sails the ship over there. And I'm going, phew, that's good. We're going in the right direction. And so it comes back to me, because if I say go that way and we're ending up in the wrong place, then it's my fault. Okay? I haven't done my job. But what I believe is that if you empower people to say, you're here, I'm sorry I'm continuing with the sailing metaphor, but it works for me. You're here, you're the sailor, you're here. Do what you do to the best of your ability, and the material that then creates will be what I need to work with. So when you saw Martina in the film there, she's working with the group. She has her concept of what the material is. She has been an agent in the creation of that material. So in the old days, a choreographer would work, and they would go out and they would go, it's like this, and then we go here, and then it'd be great, we would fly through the air here, do that, and then everybody would go, okay, and they would master every moment. But the process has evolved enormously now, and there are some choreographers who never, ever demonstrate anything. You work with people, you give them ideas, you empower their creativity to generate stuff, and then you look at what you've got, and your role becomes much more a case of, wow, there's all these fantastic ideas. I could have a bit of that and a bit of that, and I can steer this, and I can do that, and I can do it. And you play with people's creativity all the time. And it's really rewarding, because you get instead of it all having to come out of your head, you've now got this fantastic team that are generating material, and you get to pick. It's like a great big buffet of creativity. It's fantastic. And everybody's going, oh, I've got this idea, and I can do this, and I can do that, and it'd be great. And then suddenly you're at the other end of it going, whoa, okay, we'll have a bit of that, bit of that, bit of that. Sorry, that looks lovely, but we'll use it another time. And you're trying to work your way through it in terms of what is the elements that we want, how can we fashion it? But everybody feels a positive involvement on it because they're all creating and giving to the team. So we're all therefore invested. So what you're trying to do with your team is to get a single intention to make this work. You're trying to bring the team. So the fundamental thing that I spend most of my time doing is creating teams. I create teams, and the other thing I have to do is I have to create the spark to set everybody off. So and the way that I do that spark is when I'm making a work for the studio, a touring work, whatever, I spend years on research. I'm embedded in a number of universities in the UK, and I do a lot of academic research. So for a show that we're touring at the moment, a stage show, Charge, I worked a lot with Oxford University, medical department, and the scientists researching the process of electrical transmission in the human body, particularly in relation to insulin secretion. So I had a whole scientific team who fantastically just said, oh yeah, it's really interesting, come along. And they all stopped work. And these are people that had been instrumental in changing for young children from having to wear an insulin pump into just being able to take a series of pills during the day. And so they had transformed people's lives. And then they all stopped work, and then they spend days with us, and I'm going, I'm not sure this is worth it. I'm sure what you're doing is much more important. Why don't you do that? But for them, the intention is we need a wider range of communication, because the only people who ever read academic papers are other academics. So the fact of what we're doing isn't reaching. So we arrive at a simultaneous intention of we want to get our work out there. And for them, putting it out through a piece of art became a really interesting idea. And they have a little piece of film of one aspect of the show we're doing, and they show it in Oxford University as an example of how an ion channel transmits an electrical charge. And that's how it works. You meet a group of people and you find a common intention of what you need, what you both need, and then that creates a place where you can make a work. So I have all of this scientific research from them. I've got these fantastic collaborators now who are telling me things. It was the gift of a lifetime. You know, if I could go back to school now, I could pass that biology exam. It was incredible, because you have these fantastic people and they just sit down and they spend all the time talking you through it, and you go, how does that work? Oh, really? Oh, is that? And you're getting a fantastic insight into life. It's a real privilege. But for them, they're getting an insight and an outlet for their work in a whole other world. And that's a part of forming the team. That's how it works with all different things. What is it? What is it I bring? What is it you bring? How do we mutually create something together that benefits all of us? So I get all that information, and then I have to bring it back to my dancers, and we have to make a work. And I'll come back to this point at a moment, okay? Because it's always the key thing. I now want to jump to another level where I'm here. I get asked to come and make a show like the big one I did in Copenhagen or the Olympics. I get asked to come here, and the people who ask me to come here, their intention is not to give me a load of money so that I can have a good time playing with the toys and just say whatever I want to say. So the intention of the work when I come here is that I have to say something, and in the process of saying something, enable a moment where people take the forms that I offer and create a work with me that is about them as much as it is about me. Because when we make something creatively, you get a brief from your employer, or you work on your own and you spend ages doing your code or your drawing or your poem or whatever it is your form is. In order to move forward with that, you have to make a connection between what you're creating and the people who will buy it, use it, utilize it in whatever form. So when I come here, the first and really interesting part of the connection is I have to find something that I believe in, that I want to say, my intention, and I have to meet a range of people. So Andrea and Norbert, they set up a whole series of interviews across the city with people who could tell me about aspects of their life and their relationship to this city. And then from that information, I then have to fashion. Narrative is a loaded word, but there has to be a line through the piece in terms of what happens. I have to fashion some form of narrative for this structure to make a work that will try and attempt to communicate something where I feel a connection with the city and the city feels a connection with itself, this moment. And as I said at the beginning, we never truly know each other, so why should an outsider come to this city and make a work about this city? Surely it should be somebody in the city, because they know what they're talking about. Because as an outsider, I've just come here, what do I know about Timisoara? But you turn that around, because as the outsider, I have the privilege of the outsider's view. The fact that I know nothing is actually my strength. Because then I hear things and I interpret it in my way, and I try and make a moment from that intention. So this is the next level of intention. I'm meeting people and I'm trying to find a connection. And so, because the form I'm working in, when you work on the large scale, the way it communicates has to be ever simpler. It can have lots of complex ideas, but it has to come in a fairly simple form. So you want to make something there. So when I was making this show, and when I was talking to people, what really interested me was how the city is young, because it's changing radically. And one of the things that really fascinated me was post-89, a lot of people left the city, lived in Denmark and London and New York and wherever, and then they all came back because I was talking to them. And their view, unanimously, was the reason that they came back was the place that they were was really interesting, it was great, there was a lot going on, but they felt the societies in which they were rigid. Whereas if they came back here, they felt that it was developing and changing, and there was room to make your mark. There was room to effect a change. There was a room to be active. And so I thought, this is really an interesting moment, because that's something I'm really aware of in my life. I'm always looking for room to make a mark and be active, and I understand that connection. So the show began to shape in my mind in terms of what I can say as, okay, I'm going to make a show about Timisoara, and you know, the little elevator buzz line is, the idea is that the show will be the simple fact that what makes a city are its people. The people are the light of the city. It's not the structures, it's not the buildings, it's not the economics, it's the actual people who live here. Each of them is independent, and each of them is a powerful voice. And each of them has something to contribute. So you then try and fashion it. So then the next stage is, in order to say this, I can't just come here, make a show with all my performers and tell everybody, ooh, everybody here, everybody's important. What I have to do, the next level of intention, is just as I work with my creators and collaborators, the people that I work with on making this event have to want to make it, so I have to find volunteers and I have to relate to them. And they have to feel invested in making a show about the city and themselves. So you're then trying, under very difficult circumstances, because you're in another country, it all costs money, it takes time, but you're trying to format and frame creative communities in which to work with people from across the social spectrum, because you don't know who they are and why they're volunteered, but they're there. So you're then repeating that process on another scale to make it work. Okay? So what I'd like to look at now is going back right to the basic of this moment of changing intention from a simple to the bigger. So what I'd like to look at, I don't actually need to do that. So what I'm going to do is just that little bit of rehearsal. Yes. So this, my dancers always kill me for doing this. This is really early on in creating a work. And they're just working with a few physical ideas which will then go on to create the work. So, what we're doing here, in terms of the intentions involved at the start of the process, is whenever I make a work, I have a lot of ideas and I'm going, but I fundamentally subscribe to the Japanese principle, the calligraphy, and extensively across Asia, is the idea that the first mark that you make will define what you do. Because everything, as soon as you've made a mark, everything else is interpreted in relation to that mark, and meanings assembled in that way. So as soon as you've made that first mark, it's defining what you're doing, because you always have to rationalize, you always have to relate to it. It has to have a series of connections, which can be as abstract as you like, or as literal. But as soon as you're active, as soon as you make your mark, it will define it. As soon as you write that first line of code, as soon as you write the first line of a book, it does. And it is true, you can go back over and get rid of it and go, but it will begin to form all the ideas that you're doing in terms of how it goes. Even if it's ultimately deleted, there will be an influence of it, because you might write that first line and then you go on and on and on and you go, oh God, this is just rubbish, but actually there's this great idea in there. You know, you write a first line about you were on the Titanic and it was going to sink, and then you go on and you get into a load of characters, and then you think, oh, but this person can't swim, so their story's going to be about how they really are worried about that. And then you start on, and then you realise, actually, I don't want to write about the Titanic at all. I want to write about this person who can't swim. But you got to that person who can't swim because you started writing about the Titanic. its influence is always there. So as soon as you start to order and make a mark, your creative process is on a track. And how you interpret what your intentions are, what makes us all different in our creativity. So in order to come into this, I've been to Oxford and I've talked to loads of scientists about how electrical charge travels through the human body. And my intention for making this work is I wanted to make a show about energy. And originally it was because I'd worked with a load of other scientists and I was really interested in climate change and I thought I should make a show about energy. But then as I was going along, I thought, well, I'm not Al Gore. He's kind of done that really well. So what do I have to say? And then it became really interesting to think of the human body, because the human body is fundamentally an electrical system. And then it became really interesting because then I'm making a show about energy where I'm not talking about the light switches and the electric fans. I'm talking about the fact that the way that we grow our food, everything that we do, is all part of an energy process. This is what we're doing. So I have this vast concept that I'm dealing with, and these dancers here, when we're going into work, in this section, I now know in the UK, and I think across Europe, because I'm not sure about everybody's law, but the definition of death is the complete absence of electrical signal in the human brain. So, as I have witnessed, you can be in a hospital holding a perfectly warm body that's breathing away and looks just like the person you love. It's there, but no electrical activity, and they are dead. Because we often think, oh, you know, it's not. It's the absence of electrical energy moving through the brain. And so, as we're going into this part of the process, it's my intention to talk about the fact that when the brain shuts down, life is over. It's the end of life. So I'm talking about the moment of death as an energy experience. So, however, if I go in and I say to my dancers, okay, I'd like you now to go away and improvise, be creative about the moment of death as an electrical impulse. I could try it, I suppose, but in my experience, it doesn't really work. So what I have to do, and what I often do, is play with this intention, and I set up misintentions for a creative process. So I will tell the artists that I'm working with, can you explore this idea, this concept in this way? And then the results that they give me, I then take completely away from their intention and use it in a different way. I reassign the meanings by the way that I put it together. So here, and I use different tools. Even in the movement here, we're contemporary dancers, which has a bit of ballet. And the thing about contemporary dance is that it's the dance form that just uses everybody else's movement as well as its own. It's a sponge, just absorbs everything around it. And when you come out, you can see the two women standing on each other's shoulders, and there's moments of what's called circus movement, hand-to-hand and balancing. And that way of moving has its own complete journey. It has its own sense, and it doesn't have particular meanings ascribed to it in the way that other forms do. So they're mixing up different forms, and they're playing with the physicality of it with a real freedom, because the brief they've got is really simple and straightforward, and it's defined. The fundamental moment of creativity in scientific research, the reason that we can improvise and develop things, problem solving, is the reason that we survive. And as we all know, the tyranny of the blank piece of paper is endless. When you can do anything, it's really hard to be creative. When you have a series of boundaries imposed on you, you can then draw from all your experiences in order to relate to that problem, to find a solution. So, in order to fire people's creativity, it's sometimes interesting to give them a thorny problem that they have to struggle with, because then you get sudden new developments. And then the next layer of creativity is to take those developments and see what they look like in different contexts. So you set somebody down a path, and you take the results and you put it down a completely different path. Because, as I said at the beginning, there's a gap in how we interpret signs, sounds, meanings. And so in that gap, you can be really playful and turn things completely on their head all the time. So they're free to play around and come up with this abstract language, which then in the process, I can go, out of this material, the screens that I have film, I'm able to create a cerebral cortex. And one of the interesting parts of it is I'm able to play with a beautiful image that I was given in the human brain. And that is, when you get older, with conditions like Alzheimer's and memory loss, if you imagine the human brain as a city at night, 1 million points of light, the electrical city. And we've all seen the Hollywood movies where there's a power cut and it goes boom, and it goes black, and it goes boom, and it goes black, 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 black. If you put a human brain into a scanner and people are in the process of losing their memories, what you get is essentially the same image creatively. What you get is areas of the brain go dark. The electrical energy isn't there. You've got the power cut in those regions, and you can't access those memories anymore. Memories are physical structures and electrical systems. So every time you make a memory, you make a physical thing in your brain, your tendrils connect in different ways, and it's electrically activated. And then when those go dark, you can't get them anymore, and it's going, so you're closing down like that city at night. And death is the complete power cut. It's gone. So when they're doing that, what I can do is I can take these moments in relation to the head and that sense of disorientation of tumbling up and down and going around. And then I can create a film whereby what you see is the passage of things moving through the mind. I can use images like opening and closing doors, things moving and changing. And I can create a context where I can talk about this idea poetically. And they have been really creative, and they've got great movement that I can play with. It's very dynamic, and by the end of it, they're flying around and doing all sorts of things. But from a simple little, I want you to play with each other, and the idea is, every time your hands go to the head, you don't know where you are, and you end up being on top of each other and around each other. And they're going, okay, what does that mean to me? What's my intention when I'm doing that? And I say, I'm not going to do as I do in my art form. Directors are always the one that, what's my intention? Oh, well, over here, you're really disturbed about this, and you need to make a sandwich, but you need to also tell your husband that you're leaving him. So you have to balance these two things at the same time. You try and come up with these fake intentions. Whereas actually, if you go, no, you make this work, you have this idea, and part of making the work is you form your own intention as to why you're doing it. So that you believe in what you're doing because you have been invested in making it, and you profoundly understand what you're doing and what your intention is, and each of them has got a slightly different intention. And then I play with the context in which they're doing, so I'm playing with my intention, and we're bringing these together to make something that communicates on the theme differently to everybody who receives it. So intention is simply the moment of crossing between you, the artists, and the audience who receive it. It's a moment in which you get to play dynamically all the time with the form. Should we just take a moment? It's all a bit heavy at this point, isn't it? Sorry. I'm kind of... I really want now to just go, okay. So I'm trying to get to the heart of what it is. I've tried to get to the heart of what it is I do, and I know I'm just talking at you. I'm sorry, it's really not very interesting because it's not very engaging at this point, I know. But I really wanted to get to the heart of the process of how it works. So, in the same way that I'm working with those, when I work with people in Timisoara, as you saw, we've got a little dance where we're all making a little dance with suitcases, and we walk over here and we put down suitcases, we look and we point, and we go back over here and we look and we think and we go. And the intention of it is, for each one of them, they're figuring out what they do with their case, what they're doing, where it's going. And then that scene takes place in the harbour, which Timisoara was, 1750 to 1910, where Timisoara was a bustling port with stuff coming in and out from all over the world. All the factories built on the waterfront, going down, feeding the water. But when I work with that group, I don't have to say, this was a moment where the country is involved in international trade in a specific way, where you could travel, where you could do this, people had these type of lives. They're making a dance about, I've got a suitcase, what does that mean? Who am I waiting for? What's my intention in the moment? But they all know that the group intention is to make this scene of everybody arriving at the harbour in Timisoara to start a new life. So there's levels that we play with, and that has to take part in a show which eventually skips through a couple of hundred years of your history, and it's about 40 minutes, and ends up with where you are today, with some little stories on the way. But that narrative is assembled layer upon layer upon layer of personal intention in the work and when it's made. So, I just have one quick moment. Have I got... sorry? Yeah. You can all go, phew, he's not talking at me anymore. So, this was a show in a town called Renners, which is just outside of Aarhus, which was the previous European cultural capital. And I was invited there because there was somebody there in Renners who ran the local youth theatre, and he saw an opportunity, and they got a very small amount of money from Renners to make a show. But the will in Ranas is, it's a small town. A lot of the industry has moved to Eastern Europe now because there's efficient, skilled labour forces at lower rates than there are in Denmark. And the town is a blue-collar town. And it had always been manufacturing or agriculture. And the identity of the town was beginning to be a little bit fragile because its economic base is going, and within the rest of the country, he was seen as kind of, Ranners, it's a bit rough, And there was even the fact that some people in the capital would have Ranners parties where they all dress up and get really drunk and behave badly. And it was like, okay. And I went there, and actually what I found was a beautiful town in an agricultural region, and it's surrounded by wetlands, and it was really a beautiful place. And compared to what we've got in the UK, it was really nice. It wasn't rough at all as far as some of the places that we live in, I can tell you, as our social system buckles. But, so I decided, I met people in the town, I looked at the town, we talked about it, and I thought the interesting thing here is I created two characters, because Ranners is a port, but it's a long way upriver, and they've been dredging for years, but the ships get bigger, and eventually, in the next couple of years, the port will close. So the port will go, the industry is moving, there's only the farming left, the port will be turned. But it's a beautiful place. And so I created a little story. My intention was, what is my connection between this place? Now, I had to make a little story where it was a fable there. Whereas here, it's directly related to your history, it's a particular story. In Renners, it was a little fable. Oh, I'm gonna make a show. And I created a character called the Queen of the Sea. And she symbolised all the people who'd come and go from the city for me. And she had decided that she wanted a home and she wanted children. So she comes up the river, and in the history of Ranners, they had barges. Everything that came throughout the country was pulled by people, not horses. The barges were pulled by usually men, and they were dragged day after day up and down. And the men were only paid when they had full barges, and they had to go all the way back with no money. So, and this kind of symbolised for me that working nature of the town. So we had a bargeman, and we had the Queen of the Sea, and they come together, and the show revolved around what they wanted was a home. And they couldn't live on the land because that was his place, he couldn't live in the sea, so we made a story where at the end of the show, from under the water, we pulled up a house and we flew it up in the air, and that's where they finished. They made their own home in a place by their own actions, and it had to be in the air. And for me, the thing that interested me, for most of us in terms of what we want in our lives, I feel, some people want to be kings and have empires, but most of us would just like to have a nice home and friends and be able to do what we want to do and live a creative life in our own home and engage with people. And so I wanted to make that story, that was my intention. But I had to galvanise a whole community. And the man who created that show by bringing me, his intention was to make a show that was the biggest, most impressive thing that Denmark had ever seen. So he was a man on a mission to raise the money. And we created this show, and the royal family came, and his masterstroke was to use one of Denmark's biggest pop stars as the central character. So I had to choreograph around her. And the royal family came, and all the press came, and it was right across the nation, all the papers, the amazing thing that they did in Renners. And even I have to be careful what I say, but the Crown Princess said, it was so amazing, she hadn't expected it. I was like, okay, that's great, I think. But it fundamentally went the whole way through of a town being able to present itself, in their case, to the rest of the country as a creative and powerful place. That was their intention. And I had all my own agendas, but what I had to do was create a vehicle that allowed people to say that. And it was my job to create a form that gave them that opportunity. But they all worked away like Billio to create the thing, from the people who made it to the people who performed it to the people who paid for it. And it was a real, I got called into the mayor's office at one point. I'm just doing my work. I didn't ask to do it, they asked me to come and do it. And I'm called into the mayor and he said, I'm going to have to cut benefits this week. This had better be bloody good, because actually I've got to explain why you're getting this money and they're not. And I'm like, what? No pressure then, I suppose. Ooh. And it's that you can never justify art in relation to, should I have a piece of art or should I have a kidney machine so that this person can live? Well, no contest. Art, no, not really. It's the person. But what you can say is, across a social system, there should be work, there should be the resources, there should be the opportunity to everybody to be creative, to have the intention to have an active and engaged community. That should be part of a decent society, I think. And so they galvanised, they raised the money, and it worked really well for them. It raised it, and it was really inspiring for me because it taught me a lot. And part of my intention for making a work is learning a new thing wherever I go. Learning from the people I work with, getting different views and understanding that. Part of my intention today was trying not to bore you for so long, but I'm not sure I've achieved that. But anyway, that's where we are. I'll just finish off with, when you work on the vast scale, like an Olympic opening, the fundamental premise is exactly the same. This is what I'm always interested in. The intention that you start with, the process that you go through, it goes from being a very small, crafted moment, a little exchange between you and another person. When you work on the Olympics, it becomes the Henry Ford of art, basically. You're basically working on this huge manufacturing scale where, instead of the intimate rehearsal that I'm used to, I had 650 people all dancing as hedgerows in one room, and then in the next room I've got 650 people all being punks doing another bit, and then in the next room I've got 300 people riding around doing a scene about gravity and Newton. I loved doing that ceremony because it was the first time for us that there was a conscious decision to make a political statement in an opening ceremony. Because of course it's banned, no politics in the Olympics. But we wanted to make a statement about humanity. We wanted to talk about the fact that we should all be equal, no matter who we are. And the directors created a fantastic vehicle in which we celebrated the diversity. And we had a whole scene with all the punks in it. And, they wanted to bring all these tents on stage because at the time we were having all these protests, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy London, all of that sort of thing. So they wanted all these tents on stage. But of course it was political, so that wouldn't be allowed. So we had to come up with this idea that they were all molecules, and what we were actually doing was the movements of the atoms in the universe. But actually what you got a load of tents with a load of punks with banners, protesting. And it was a double meaning, but it worked very well. But that sense of being able to engender that same sense of community to make the work. You're working with hundreds and hundreds of people, but you essentially approach each of them. You'd go around, you'd talk to people, and you'd meet different people, and you'd express things, and you'd get them to invest in making the moment. So that you shared the intention. And I'm going to share a little story with you. It's absolutely true. About what I mean as the fundamental of intention is to try and get yours and somebody else's intention as working together towards a single goal as possible in creating a team. And for the punk scene, I had people of all sorts of differing abilities in that whole performance. And there was one family, a mother had come with her son, who was profoundly disabled in a chair, and she had only come because he really wanted to audition for it. So she thought, oh, okay, I'll take him to the audition, but we'll never get in. Oh dear, she miscalculated badly. It's like, yes, you're in, oh no. So everybody auditioned, and again, for the Olympics, they set it all up as an audition, so everybody auditioned, but we were doing the Paralympic ceremony, so we'd already decided beforehand, we're going to take everyone. How can we say you can't be in it and you can, when we're talking about the fact that everybody is important? So we were going to take them, so they all came, and they all auditioned like frenzy, and then they all got in. But that actual step had really created a sense of first achievement, you're in. Then this family, they worked intensively to get this little bit of choreography right. Sorry, I'm getting old, I lose control of my emotions at different points. So they did the performance, and they were fantastic in it. They just were great. They thought they wouldn't be able to do anything, they were there, centre stage, they did a great job. And afterwards, his mother said to me, thanks, it was really great, we had a great time, and it was fantastic. And they went away, and then just a few months after, I got a call saying, I don't know why I tell this story, it just kills me every time. Basically, he had died, it was what, you know. And his mother said to me, it was so profound, because when I did that project, it was the first period in our life where my son and I were completely equal. Only somebody else could finish his story. Sorry. So, and we were completely equal, because she was as terrified as, but she never thought she would be there. She was utterly terrified of doing it. And she performed it fantastically, and he did, and they were great. And she'd phoned me to ask permission because they wanted to perform their dance at his funeral. And I think if it means that much to somebody, then in terms of intention, you really have come together to make something. And there really is a shared intention, if it means that to the people that participate. And that doesn't always happen, but that's a fantastic goal. And of all the things that I've achieved in my life and all the shows I've made, I think that moment's the most important to me. I have to stop now because I'm going to be in a puddle on the floor, sorry. There we go. How's that?
I have one question. You told us that in Timișoara it's about the people. Mm-hmm. Isn't this true for any other city?
It is. I'm sorry. Yes, it is true, because one of the things that I believe the form that I work with and the art is yes, it's true, because I'm trying to look for something that's fundamentally we can relate to about our humanity when I'm creating something. And it is true, but in the Timisoaran case, it will be the people of Timisoara who come out and say that. So it will be your statement of what I believe to be a fundamental human truth, which can never, ever not be restated. We need to remind ourselves of the things that are important about our humanity and how we're connected. And it's something that constantly, I believe, needs saying. So, yes, it's a truth, but it will be your version of that truth that you'll share with each other and the rest of the world if it goes up on the net.
Questions? Yeah, I do have a question. About the Olympics,
Yes.
how long in period of time were the rehearsals?
In the Olympics,
And how much sleep did you get?
sorry?
How much sleep did you get in that time?
Well, the time period is, I started at the beginning of June and it went up the end of August. It's about, the actual making part of it is 2 or 3 months tops, a couple of months. And when you work for the Olympics, it's fantastic. You get this massive contract, which is completely indecipherable, but you could boil it down to a couple of lines that says, you have absolutely no rights ever, and you will deliver this on time no matter what. And that's the contract you sign. So as you work on the Olympics, people end up sleeping on the floors and all sorts of things. You just do it and then it's done. Is how it works. And there are some great things that happen when you're doing this sort of thing. There was some fantastic stories, but I'll tell you those another time. But there was there was some extraordinary things that you have to go through to make it work. And I remember for Danny Boyle's opening. No, this is on the way. I'll tell you later.
Over coffee. Questions? If not, I have one.
Okay.
Because I was struck by how flexible to other people's ideas you are. And as an artistic director, at least the ones I've met previously, are very keen onto holding on their ideas. Was that always your intention to be so flexible, or did it come with experience and over time?
It definitely came with experience. I think when I started, I was the usual tyrannical autocrat of a director. It's my vision, you know. And I think a lot of that comes from that sense of finding a place in the world. And, you know, when you, as an artist, and for all of us in the creatives, in order to have a creative space, you have to fight for it. And therefore, in that fight, you think it justifies you being a tyrant at times, because it's about the work. We will. And yes, so it starts like that. But then after a while, you begin to think, actually, it's more than that. And as you make lots of work, then you think, well, what is it I'm saying? What's important? What do I think about this life that I'm living? So you have your own self-examination in order to create a work all the time. And then for me, it's always about taking in information. So I'm always reading and I'm always talking to researchers and hearing new ideas. And from that, you make a life of work, so that you're doing it all the time. And then within that, then, as soon as you've done that, you realise that what you need to do is share. And the best way is to communicate and open that. And that then allowed me to get to where I am now. And I'm very pleased about it, because it allows you to do the most important thing is, instead of expressing myself, at least in the devising of the process, I'm communicating with people. So instead of expression, it's communication, and that's what you want. So the first part, where you're the autocrat, I believe is just you going, bah! And then furthermore, when you're more responsive, then you get a dialogue.
I have, I think, the second part of your question, and it's a French type of question. I'm saying things and probably asking for confirmation. This is my hidden intention under this umbrella of Timișoara's future capital of culture. Our intention, probably your intention, any creator's intention, any manager's intention is to be present, to project their image, to project what they know, to make a statement. But in the way you told your story, and it was impressive, you didn't seem to be afraid to let people take your energy, your intention, and to play with it. Do you feel after all these experiences that you are a lesser creator, a lesser manager, that you are not seen because you delegated, because you empowered, because you made steps back in order to work with people and not only for people? I'm hoping you will confirm that, because we very much need, or I think we very much need this here in Timișoara towards 2021.
No, my work is infinitely better now. It's because the creativity, the things that I work with are people, and when they're creative, my creativity has worked. So then we come together to make something. So no, I feel empowered by devolving. So in the show in Timișoara, there are two sections where there's going to be a tango section in it, which will be made by the tango group in the town. No choreography from me. A few pointers, you need to go this way around probably, and there'll be a section that's made by the salsa group, Kizomba group. Again, absolutely no choreography from me, but I will create the contexts in which those works are seen and the meaning of them, I hope. But those people are making a work to perform to thousands within the work that I'm creating. And the whole point of a cultural capital is, what is the point in having a cultural capital if you're not being cultural and creative? So it makes complete sense to me to come here and create something in which other people can be creative and we can all perform together. Yeah. And it varies. So in this instance, I'm able to do that. In the Olympics, because of what it is and the stakes, you're investing everybody to interpret and play with the movement and be creative. But then you've got to put it together into a rigid form to make it work. But they still feel creative and part of what they're doing, and that's important. So that's a long answer, isn't it? Sorry. The short answer was yes. I feel creative.
First of all, thank you for sharing your brilliant mind with us. And I think I have a hypothetical question. You gave us the metaphor with a boat where everybody's equal, but you're just the captain and you direct energy or movement or intention. And then you also showed us how emotional we can get when we talk. You showed us that side of you about equality again at the end with the story with the lady who felt equal with her son. So if you were to create a show on equality, how would that look?
The first thing is I have to go, okay, thing about the ship metaphor is there are two ways to run a ship. You can either be a sharing captain who says, we go over there and let's all work together to get there, or you can be the captain who says, we're going over that way, lash them till we get there. Yeah, so as a tyrant. So, and ultimately, to be really honest and not hypocritical about it, the structure of a ship, the role of the captain, is they have the final word. So there is always a power relationship in everything that we do. And so what you have to say is, I have the final word because ultimately I'm responsible for the ship. So at certain times, the captain, God, I'm working this metaphor to death, aren't I? But at certain times, the captain will make a decision that's not in the best interest of some portions of the crew because he feels that it's in the best interest of the boat and everybody else to get there. So there is a tyranny in that metaphor. In terms of making a show about, I honestly believe that in all of these works, like I love making my stage work and it's fantastically rewarding. And I love making the small outdoor work, which is performances that we give. But the most profound work for me are these types of work where I come and I work with a community to make a work. And for me, that is what I strive for. I don't think I achieve it, but is a kind of equality in the process, that we all contribute to the skills and what we have to bring to it. But that's what I'm looking for. So those, I suppose, are the only models that I have towards equality, really. Does that make sense?
At the moment, no.
No. I was struggling around it like a drowning man thinking, oh God. What I'm saying is in the processes that I know and that I understand that allow me to work, I direct the process. So ultimately I'm taking control. So I can't say that it's a complete equality there. What I strive for is to allow everybody within it the room to have their say, if I can, in whatever form. And that's as near as I get, really, at that point. But I continue to learn, and if I find more ways of doing it, then I'll adopt them.
And having maybe helps the captain a third possibility to add to the two you mentioned about the captain. The captain doesn't want to do the job of the skipper at the same time with the job of the person who, I don't know. So all the jobs in the ships, because you know better than everybody. A third possibility.
I don't know you know better. I think it's, you're in that position and you're doing that, so you should do what you do as well as you can and allow everybody else to do what they do as well as they can. Because I'm tiptoeing around a whole field of broken ice of hypocrisy in this one if we're not careful. So it's really important that if people feel that they have been able to contribute, then you've done something right. If they feel that they were just used, then it hasn't worked.
Were you waiting for a picture of a show as an answer? Because
I
I
was
think,
trying to take it there, but that's fine.
because correct me if I'm wrong, is this, because the question was more in terms of how would a show about equality look like, but is that theme of equality kind of reoccurs in your performances? Is that your intention or it just happens?
It is an intention in terms of, because what interests me is my connection to other people in terms of what it is. I'm at the point in my life where, you know, I have children and I'm, you know, they're all on their own lives and we're doing things. What is it to be, what is it you want to say? What is it to be human? How do we live? how do we communicate to each other when we fundamentally are only ever guessing what each other means? So in that, the more that you can find a sense of shared enterprise in an activity, then you can share an experience together and respond together to that. And that seems to be an equal process that I want to explore in all my work, really.
That was a corker, that was. Sorry.
Not enough decaf for Kevin yet.
What's your best source of inspiration?
At the moment, my best source of inspiration is, for my own work, is science. I'm fascinated by what we're discovering and how it's changing our lives and the fundamental nature of our lives. So a lot of my work now has a science basis to it for touring work, and that's theoretical science. So the show that you saw with all the blocks and the circus performers and dancers, that show came out of a piece of science research about energy, whereby human beings, I learned the fact that human beings are one of 3 super species on the planet. And the super species are humans, ants, and termites. And what distinguishes us as a super species is that we all build cities. The city is a mechanism. The size of a city is dictated by how much energy you can get into it every day. So you can, up until, it was incredible, up until the Industrial Revolution, the size of the cities were dictated from the times of ancient Rome. It never changed. It was about the amount of food and transport system that you had to get the energy in and the water. That's the size of a city. Cities are engines of creativity and culture. 3 species, ants, termites, humans, make cities whereby energy is efficiently brought in, lots of people can live together, which you can't do normally because you can't get enough food or water or power. The city then grows, and the thing that distinguishes humans is that when a city is efficient, individual ants and termites in the cities go, hey, it's efficient, we all slow down. Humans don't do that. They're the only species on a city that when they're in a city, they individually accelerate in terms of their energy use and their action. And I found that really fascinating. So that turned into a show with a load of giant Jenga blocks about making communities and how we live in cities and how the type of energy we use. So I use science really broadly to fire me on in terms of making that work. And these shows, the big ones, is all about meeting people, talking to them, finding out what they think, some of what they tell me of what they think and what they believe about a certain subject, and then trying to find in myself what I think and believe about that subject and find a common ground. Those are my 2 major inspirational sources.
Thank you.
Questions?
Yeah. You told us about what you found here in Timișoara. What is the uniqueness of the city? What you saw here as an outsider as something unique yet that you didn't saw anywhere else?
What I find fascinating about the city is there are a number of things. Firstly, I didn't know Timișoara existed before I came here. I'd never heard of it, to be honest. And I came, and what really intrigued me was the range of cultural preconceptions in relation, because, like, for example, the simple thing of when you live in Britain, there are lots of Romanians who live in Britain who work on farms and various things, and there's a view about Romanians doing all of that work that English people don't want to do anymore. But I live in a town which is, the major engine of the town is software. So all around me, there are loads of Romanian people who live there who are working for games companies, artificial intelligence, loads of that sort of stuff. So I'd already had that cross, but then I come here and everybody I spoke to people with numbers of degrees, speak several languages. In the town where I live, you know, English and French maybe. Me, I'm a complete dummy, I'm just stuck with English. I'm just rubbish. It's one of the great things in my life that I would like to go back and change is I'd like to know another language, but I don't. So I was faced with this city, and you can't ignore the cultural concept which I find. I'm fascinated because I went to Berlin in the 70s and 80s, and I went to East Berlin and that area, and I saw life then. And then I went to Berlin after the wall came down, and I saw that change. And then I've come here, and I've seen this society, and I'm emerging. And one of the things that fascinated me is the drive that we no longer have to make a society. And I think that that's really, really exciting. You know, that's why I've got this bit about people coming back, because they really want to make something of it. They want to be actively engaged. And a lot of the societies that I deal with in Britain and some like Denmark and mainland Europe and stuff, they're struggling with their identity, but they're kind of locked into something. Whereas here, everywhere I talk, the different experiences, the students who are here studying medicine in French at the university because they've come from North Africa, the people who are building brand new parts of the city in construction, the people who are architects, the people who running a shop, there's this sense of creating something that the city's going forward. It's such an attractive energy. It's like, I'd like to do that. Can I be part of that? It's kind of boring where I am, you know what I mean? This is great, I'd really like it. And that's what I found, and that's why I wanted to do this thing about the light of the city being its people, and to try and make this energy of a show if I can. So that's what I found exciting about it.
Great feedback. I don't know if we're aware of that, but it's really reassuring to hear it. That.
So you said you've lately been influenced by technical science, and my question is, would you consider computer science as an inspiration for you, like artificial intelligence and all these directions that the world is going in right now?
My next show is called Frontier, and it's about artificial intelligence. So I'm working with robotics at Warwick University, and I have a meeting with the head of informatics at King's in College London in terms of that sort of thing. And I love it. And here in this project, I love the technology in this city. And I've got 150 drones for the show, and I'm like, yes, love it. Because the other side of it is, you know, I talk all about working with the community and all the rest of it, but I love playing with the toys. You know, it's fantastic. It's just great. And I'm really looking forward to that. And I'm really interested in artificial intelligence in terms of what it means for us. You know, is it going to be the golden age where we've all got time to be creative, or is it going to be something else? And you know, how do we hold on to our humanity through that next transition? Because I think it's going to be a step change. So it fascinates me, yes, all the time.
Thank you. Well, on this note, then seeing the time and the fact that people are struggling to stay but still thinking about work that they have to get to, thank you, Kevin, once more. And it doesn't mean he's leaving yet from Ambasada. His plane is a bit later. We promised him a few hours of nap because of this, but you can still chat with him over a coffee that we promised to provide, the double decaf espresso. That's his drug of choice.
Thank you.
But thank you once more for waking up, sharing all these amazing stories, and coming here and doing all this work, and becoming a part of the Creative Mornings Tigashara community as well.
Well, thank you very much. And I want to say that I think it's fantastic what they're doing here at Bly and the work that they're doing.
Well, stop that.
No, I think it's really incredible because the moment of creativity that you're doing is creating community. And actually, I think that's the most creative thing that you can do, and you apply tremendous energy to it. So I have nothing but admiration for you. So.